Hello and welcome back to another episode of FightOrFlight. I recently picked up ORBX's highly rated FTX Norway together with one of the best freeware scenery packages I've ever come across in the form of Airports of Norway. I can't recommend this freeware scenery enough. Together with AoN GA edition, it clocks in at over 5GB of extra scenery and it doesn't cost you a single cent. If you have FTX Norway installed, you owe it to yourself to at least check it out. I'll put a link to it in the description below. This time I'll take you through a complete flight in my favourite regional turboprop, Majestic's Bombardier Dash-8 Q400. I definitely recommend the Q400 for those GA pilots who'd like to get into airliners but are a little bit intimidated by the likes of the NGX and 777. While the Q400 lacks some of the automated systems of the big jets, it's a fun and rewarding aircraft to fly and gives you a lot of hands-on experience that can be transferred to the other larger airliners. We're flying with Norwegian airline Wideroe today on a real-world route between Kristiansand on the south coast of Norway to Trondheim, just over 300 nautical miles away. We're using Active Sky Next's live weather and we're pretty much guaranteed clear skies for the duration of the flight. I've already set the payload and fuel with the Majestic control panel based on the data given to me from PFPX. We're flying the Vavit 7 Bravo departure out of Kristiansand and arriving via VVOD-1 mic into Trondheim. I'll load up the Navigraph charts in PDF kneeboard a little later. Let's jump straight into the virtual cockpit and get set up. I have my default Q400 flight set to a cold and dark configuration. The Q400 takes almost no time at all to start up, and it's the closest thing I'll get to a panel config until a Pro version is released. As always, we're flying with FS2Crew voice control, which I'll begin to make use of in just a few seconds. First of all, we'll turn on the batteries and set the main bus tie. Now we can begin with the first FS2Crew voice command. Cockpit to ground.
Go ahead.
Connect external power.
Roger, connecting the GPU.
Once the power is available, we'll switch to the GPU and turn off the batteries.
Bank angle.
Captain, the GPU is now connected.
Turning off the batteries saves wear and tear in the real world. We'll run the FS2Crew pre-flight events and carry on with the power-up checklist.
Hi Captain, how are you today?
Switch position lights on and all flight deck displays powered on. After initializing the FMS, we can start the originating flow. I won't perform all of the tests as the Pilot Edition unfortunately doesn't model any failures. However, I have a feeling that some of them will be extremely useful when the Pro Edition is released. MFD to doors. AC and DC gen switches on. Engine intake doors are opened for the first officer's walk around. ELT is armed. And we'll perform the APU fire test and the other tests available from the fire detection panel. Pressurization is set to auto and the outflow is fully counterclockwise. The elevation at Trondheim is 56 feet, so we'll set the landing altitude to 0. Position lights on, passenger signs both on.
I'm out for the walk around.
Check the caution and advisory lights to make sure they all light up. Recirc switch to on. Bleeds 1 and 2 are off. Bleed flow to min. Pack switches are auto. Nose wheel steering is off. And we'll run the ADC and stall tests from this panel. As you'll notice, even though the failures aren't modelled in this version, all the warning lights and systems are already in place. Confirm the flight taxi switch is set to taxi. HSI selector should be set to the pilot flying position and will arm the yaw damper. The nav source selector is typically set to the purple needles for departure. We'll go ahead and set up the rest of the flight guidance control panel as we're not flying with ATC today and there are no altitude restrictions until we start our descent. Cruise altitude for this flight is the Q400 ceiling of flight level 250. Let's enter that into the altitude selector. Set the heading to our departure runway of 213 degrees. We'll finish our originating flow by checking the power levers are disconnected, the condition levers are fuel off, and the emergency brake is on. Now we'll tune COM1 to the 80s frequency and set the QNH.
Echo, November, Charlie, November, airport information, November 1350, Zulu, weather, wind 288 at 10, visibility 10, sky clear, temperature 16, dew point -1, QNH 1005, advise on initial contact, you have information, November, Echo, November, Charlie, November, airport information, November.
The final part of the originating flow is setting up the FMS. Hit data and clear any messages. Let's bring up our flight plan in PDF Kneeboard. I've seen a few variations of how to enter a flight plan in the FMS. Some people use the nav page for the initial departure and destination airports, and some people enter everything one by one in the FPL page. This is how I do it. On the FPL page, hit menu and then depart. Kristiansand is Echo November Charlie November. We're taking off from runway 22 via the Vavit 7 Bravo SID. From Vavit, we'll take the Mike 609 airway to Belgu. Select the line after Vavit and hit List. On the right of the FMS, select Airway. Mike 609 is the only airway listed, so input 1, then enter. Belgu is at position 11. We just need to repeat the procedure for the other airways in the flight plan. At some point during the setup, you'll hear the dispatcher ask me if we can start boarding the passengers, to which I'll reply yes.
Hi guys, can we start boarding now?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll back with the load sheet later.
After VVOD, we can enter our arrival. Push menu, then arrive. Trondheim is Echo November Victor Alpha. We're landing on runway 27 via VVOD 1 mic. Input the transition and don't forget to enter the approach. Again, we aren't flying with ATC today, so we have the advantage of knowing exactly which start and approach we'll be using on arrival. ILS 27 approach with the Zilda transition. With our flight plan fully entered, we'll set our MFD back to nav and hit the format button. This way we can step through our route and check that everything looks okay. We'll also go through and delete any no links in the flight plan. We'll leave the one at the end that should be deleted if and when we need to perform a missed approach. Hit Format again and set the MFDs to their previous state. Now we'll select the fuel page on the FMS and enter the values from our flight plan. We'll update the fuel on board just before takeoff to make sure that the data is accurate. Finally, we enter our 0 fuel weight and the FMS setup is complete. While we're waiting for the first officer to return from the walk around, we'll take a quick look at our charts. We're at gate 14 and taking off from runway 22. So we'll need to be facing right after pushback. We'll taxi to the runway via Bravo, enter, then perform a backtrack for takeoff. The Vavit 7 Bravo SID takes us along this route to Vavit. For the VVOD-1 Mike arrival, we'll descend towards Adexa and follow the route around until we hit our initial approach fix at Zilda. Finally, we want to be at 4,000 feet by the time we get to Nevos to intercept the glide slope and land. We should keep in mind that there are a few altitude and speed restrictions along the way.
Back from the walk around, everything looks good.
Let's perform the departure brief. While the departure brief is playing, we'll turn the batteries back on, close the engine intake doors and start up the APU.
Are you ready for the departure briefing?
Go ahead.
This will be a standard left seat departure. We're at a gate and pushback is required, so you will be handling the engine start. The departure runway and taxi route will be assigned by ATC. For the taxi, this airport does not use ASDEC, so leave the transponder off the taxi. Pilot flying nav source for the departure will be LNAV. Anti-ice is not required today. As for the takeoff plan, we'll use flaps 5. For the routing itself, the departure will be an ATC assigned standard instrument departure. We'll use NTOP for the takeoff power, and the bleeds will be on. For the safety brief, any abnormality prior to 80 knots, I'll stop the aircraft on the runway. After 80 knots, I'll stop for an engine failure or fire. Anything after V1 will take it airborne. You let the tower know and we'll need a straight out. At 1,000 feet, we'll engage altitude hold, accelerate to V-climb, retract the flaps, engage IAS mode for our V-climb, and complete the memory items. Any questions?
That's checked and no questions.
Departure briefing complete.
We'll skip the 24-hour system check checklist this time. Let's switch power over onto the APU and ask the ground crew to disconnect the GPU. Cockpit to ground.
Go ahead.
Please disconnect external power.
Roger, disconnecting the GPU.
At this point we need to set our V-speeds and acceleration altitude, which is normally 1,000 feet above ground level. We set the QNH earlier, so we just add 1,000 to the current value. Our acceleration altitude will be 1,060 feet.
Captain, the GPU is now disconnected.
Next, we'll set our V-speeds. A lot of people like to use the web-based AuraSim app. Alternatively, you can use the included tables that come with the Q400 documentation, or better still, you can use a brilliant little Lua script that I found on the Majestic forums. You'll need to be running a fully registered version of FS2IPC to use it, but it automatically calculates your takeoff and landing V-speeds at the touch of a button. Upon running the script, you'll see some current data and we can simply enter our required flap setting, which for this flight is flaps 5. The correct V-speeds are entered immediately. Let's quickly check the hydraulic number 3 pressure and ask our virtual first officer for the first checklist. Before start checklist.
Stand by. Originating checks flow.
Complete.
Complete. Gear pins. Stowed. Pre-flight checks.
Complete.
Complete. External power. APU voltage.
On. Checked 27 volts.
Circuit breakers.
Checked.
Checked. Escape hatch.
Closed.
Nose steering.
Off.
Flight guidance control panel. Set. Fuel quantity. 2,421 kilos on board.
2000 kilograms required.
Hydraulic number 3 pressure.
Check 3000 psi.
Emergency brake. Pressure.
Park. Checked.
Power levers.
Disc.
Condition levers.
Fuel off.
Emergency light switch.
Arm.
Fasten seatbelt switch.
On.
On. Departure briefing.
Complete.
Complete. Before start checklist complete.
At this point we're ready for pushback, but FS2Crew hasn't finished the pre-flight events yet, and we still have 16 minutes before everything is complete. We'll simply click on the time left indicator on the main panel until we get to 1 minute.
Hi guys, here's the load sheet for you.
Hi Captain, the cabin is ready to go. If you need anything, just let me know.
We'll wait until the exits are closed before proceeding. We'll double check the batteries, switch anti-collision light to red, and confirm the APU bleed is off. At this point I like to start the GSX procedure. Remember, we want to be facing to the right after pushback. Engine start checklist to the line.
Battery master main auxiliary standby.
On.
Doors fueling lights.
Closed and out.
Anti-collision light.
Red.
Engine start checklist completed to the line.
Locking gear.
We'll wait a little longer until GSX is set up before completing the checklist. Below the line.
APU bleed.
Off.
Engine clear on 2.
Clear on 2.
Engine start checklist complete.
Departure check completed, Captain. Bypass pin inserted. And release parking brakes, sir. Commencing the push, Captain. Start engines at your discretion.
Start 2 for me, please.
Starting 2.
You'll notice there's a bug and I'm not sure if it's the Q400 or GSX, but during pushback if the FO starts number 2, the engine doesn't actually start turning until the pushback is complete and the parking brake is applied. Of course, this doesn't really affect anything, it just means it takes us a little longer to start up.
and set parking brakes, please. Unlocking gear. Captain, the tow truck is disconnected and the bypass pin is removed.
After number 2 has started correctly, we'll increase the number 2 condition lever to max. Be extremely careful with these levers, especially during flight, as they're incredibly sensitive and it's all too easy to set one to fuel off.
Left and right both clear. Clear to start both engines.
Start one for me, please.
Starting one.
After setting both condition levers to max, we'll switch off the APU and the main bus tie. Ice protection isn't required for takeoff, but we'll switch the pitos to standby. Let's check the rudder travel. Nose wheel steering to on. The first officer has already set the radar to standby, we'll just set our MFD to nav. After start checklist.
Standby. External power APU.
Off.
Main bus tie.
Off.
Ice protection.
Checked, not required.
Checked, not required. Rudder travel.
Full travel.
Nose steering.
On.
Auto feather.
Auto feather select.
Engine rating.
NTOP set, checked.
Batteries.
Checked.
Flaps.
Five set, 5 indicating.
5 set indicating. Auxiliary standby PTU pumps.
On.
On. Hydraulic pressure quantity.
Checked.
Checked. Hydraulic number 3 and elevator. Checked. Caution warning lights.
Checked.
Flight instruments radios.
Checked.
Checked. Altimeters.
1005 set, cross check.
1005 set and cross checked. After start checklist complete.
Clear on the left.
And we're clear on the right.
Now we can start the taxi. We'll quickly check the takeoff warning to see if there's anything we missed. No audible warning means everything's okay. The Q400 tends to want to veer left upon takeoff, so we'll add 8 units of right rudder to keep us centered. Before takeoff checklist to the line.
Flight attendants, please be seated for departure. Hello, flight deck. Okay, cheers. Captain, they're secure at the back. FA notification received. Takeoff briefing complete. Cabin PA complete. Condition levers.
Max.
Max. Trims.
3 set.
3 set. Takeoff warning test.
Tested.
Flight controls checked and free. Flight taxi.
Flight.
Radar terrain. Transponder TCAS on out. Takeoff checklist completed to the line.
Now we'll just confirm our takeoff fuel in the FMS. This time the taxi was so short that there won't be much difference. It's good practice to do it anyway though. Below the line.
Bleeds min on. External lights on. Runway.
Runway 22, heading 213.
Before takeoff checklist complete. 80 knots.
Check.
V1, rotate. Positive rate.
Gear up.
Gear up.
Select nav.
Nav selected. Acceleration altitude.
Flaps 0, IAS 160, climb checklist to the line. We'll switch the autopilot on just before we get to transition altitude.
Climb checklist completed to the line.
Autopilot on.
Autopilot is on.
One 1013 set, cross-check.
1013 set and cross-checked.
Props 900 below the line.
Climb checklist complete. $1,000 to go. Out cell.
Our first officer has announced we're 1,000 feet from our cruise altitude, so when we level off, we'll ask him to set cruise power and get established in the cruise. Set cruise power.
Cruise power set.
Before we sit back and enjoy the scenery, we should take advantage of the time we have and start planning our descent. As you may have noticed from looking through the flight plan, there's no automatic top of descent marker set. We have to calculate it using the VNAV function on the FMS. Let's go ahead and bring up the VNAV page. This page seems to cause some trouble for a lot of people the first time they use it. It's not very intuitive at first, but once you've done it once or twice, it becomes much easier to understand. The field we're interested in is the 2 field at LSK 3 left. Here's where we'll enter our target altitude fix. As we know from our approach chart, we want to be at Nevos at 4,000 feet to intercept the glide slope. The cursor will move over to the field in the middle, which is our fix offset. In simple terms, this is how far away from Nevos we want to be when we hit our target altitude. For example's sake, let's enter 2. The next field along is our target altitude. In this case, the nav data already contains the restriction, so 4,000 is already set. Hit enter. Finally, we have the vertical descent rate, which by default is 1800 feet per minute and is usually a good starting point. Hit enter again. That's it. We now have a top of descent point programmed into the FMS. The VNAV page shows our top of descent is 243 miles away, and we'll get there in approximately 38 minutes. Over on the right, we can see that our descent angle is 2.69 degrees. If we look through our flight plan, we'll now see a TOD marker around 20 miles before VVOD. Let's try it again with different values. We'll go ahead and select NEVOS with no offset, and we'll input a descent rate of 2,500 feet per minute. Our distance to top of descent is now further away, and our descent angle has increased to 3.66 degrees. If we look again at our flight plan, we'll see the new top of descent marker is 5 miles before Rotke. This particular way is an easy way to get a reliable VNAV path every time. Simply pick a fix, an offset, and a descent rate. However, for the flight today, we can go one step further. Let's bring up our standard arrival chart once again. Our first restriction is flight level 100 at Rotke, then a DEXA at or above our transition altitude of 7,000 feet, together with a maximum speed of 220 knots. We have another restriction at Zilda of 6,000 feet. Now onto our approach chart. Our initial approach fix is Zilda, so we'll want to be at 200 knots when we get there and put in 5 degrees of flaps. After 5 miles we'll hit Tikmu at or above 4,700 and turn onto our final runway heading of 267 degrees. At 11 miles from Trondheim we'll hit Nevos at 4,000. We have multiple restrictions throughout our star and approach, so this time we only need to enter the first restriction and the FMS will calculate the vertical path to obey all restrictions and level out and descend the airplane as needed. Back to VNAV. Import Rotke, no offset, and 1800 feet per minute. Now we have our final descent path set, and we'll begin our descent in just under 30 minutes. We're planning on descending at 230 knots, as close to idle power as possible. Of course, the Q400 isn't equipped with an auto throttle, so we'll have to monitor our power to make sure we don't bust any speed restrictions during the descent. Now we can sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight. We're about 10 minutes from top of descent, and before we make the final preparations, I wanted to talk a little bit about the approach. As we entered the ILS approach in the FMS earlier, we can go ahead and review it by loading up the flight plan page, hitting menu, and then next until we get to page 2. Hit LSK5 left to get to the approach plan. Here we can see ILS 27, the runway heading of 267 degrees, and the ILS frequency of 109.9. There are two ways to fly the approach. I like to think of them as semi-auto and full auto using the FMS. The semi-auto way is inputting the ILS frequency and changing the nav source to the blue needles when we turn onto our final approach heading. To use the ILS frequency in the semi-auto way, we'll go down to the ARCDO and enter 109.9 in VOR1. When we're in range, the ILS frequency shows up on the PFD and we're able to see the distance to the transmitter. Additionally, we want to set our runway heading. Click and hold the Format button until we get a blue line overlay on the navigation display. If we use the course selector on the control panel, we can set the runway course of 267 degrees. Click and hold the Format button again to confirm it. When we turn onto our final approach heading, it's just a case of selecting the blue needles to capture the localizer and pressing the APPR button on the control panel to capture the glide slope. The full autoway is executed with the FMS exclusively. If we bring up our nav page, we can see an option on the right displaying APPR or approach. When we're in range of the ILS, this button will display ARM APPR. At this point, you have the option to press it again to tune the approach if your ILS frequency isn't entered into the ARCDO, and then press one more time to activate the approach. As long as we're within 100 feet of the required altitude at Nevos, the Q400 will intercept the localizer and glide slope flawlessly. You'll see it in action later. First, we'll tune the ATIS to the active sky next frequency for our destination and set the QNH in the standby altimeter.
Echo, November, Victor, Alpha, airport information, Kilo, 1450, Zulu, weather, wind, 286 at 17, caution, wind shear alert, 9 miles east of Echo, November, Victor, Alpha, visibility, 10, sky condition, few clouds at 3,500, ceiling 9,000, broken, heavy, rain, thunderstorms in the vicinity, temperature 112. 4 QNH 1005. Advise on initial contact. You have information. Kilo Echo November Victor Alpha airport information. Kilo 1450 Zulu weather wind.
The ATIS informed us that there's less than ideal weather at Trondheim with heavy rain and thunderstorms. I said we would have clear skies for the duration, but it seems like I spoke too soon. Let's continue with the descent procedure. Let's set our decision height of 310 feet, which is 250 plus runway elevation. We'll use our Lewis script again to automatically calculate and enter our ref speeds. We'll go ahead and enter our altitude of 4,000 feet and press Alt-Cell to confirm it. Now we'll perform the approach brief.
Are you ready for the approach brief?
Okay.
Okay, we will be arriving by the ATC assigned standard terminal arrival route. As for the approach, we can expect the ILS. Landing runway condition is wet. Anti-ice is not required. We will use flats 15 for landing. The bleeds will be on. And for the decision height, it's 310 feet. After landing, please leave the APU off and turn the transponder off since this airport doesn't use ASDEX. Lastly, it looks like we'll be assigned to stand. The taxi route will be assigned by ATC. Any questions?
That's checked and no questions.
Approach brief complete.
Descent checklist to the line.
Altimeters.
1013 set crosscheck.
1013 set and cross-checked. Fuel balance. Check. Pressurization set. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for arrival. Cabin PA complete. Fasten seatbelt switch. On. Approach and landing brief.
Completed.
Complete. Descent checklist completed to the line.
We're 18 miles from top of descent and the vertical path ladder is now showing on the PFD. This means we can now arm VNAV and confirm that the correct altitude is set and confirmed. At the top of descent marker, we'll see the bug move towards the center and eventually the plane will intercept the vertical path. Make sure to reduce power as we enter the dive and try to maintain a descent speed of 230 knots.
Looks like we're picking up some ice.
The FO has confirmed that ice is detected, so on the overhead set the airframe selector fast, prop heat on and open the engine intake doors. If we were on approach we would also increase the ref speeds. While we're here we'll switch the windshield heat to normal and the pilot side window heat to on. This prevents them from fogging up. When the ice detection warning has gone, we'll reverse the procedure. Now we're descending through our transition altitude of 7,000 feet, we can set our QNH to the value we entered into the standby altimeter earlier and confirm it with the FO. Then complete the descent checklist. 1005 set, cross-check.
1005 set and cross-checked.
Below the line.
GPWS landing flap. Selected 15 degrees. Fuel transfer. Off. Hydraulic pressure quantity. Check. Caution warning lights. Check. Approach flare lights. On. Ref speed switch bugs.
Off, set.
Off set. Flight attendants notification complete. Descent checklist complete.
Coming up to our initial approach fix, we'll drop the first stage of flaps. Flaps 5.
Flaps 5.
We're turning onto the final approach heading, so we'll hit arm approach on the nav page. Sometimes it takes a few seconds to intercept if you're not lined up correctly, but if you see an intercept option become available, select it and you'll see LNAV APBR on the top left of the PFD. Just before Nevos, we'll hit approach on the control panel and you'll see GS displayed on the top right of the PFD.
2500.
Gear down.
Gear down.
As you can see, ice is no longer detected, so we can reverse the anti-ice procedure we completed earlier. Flaps 15 before landing checklist.
Flaps 15, landing gear.
Down 3 green.
Down 3 green. Condition levers. 1000 above.
Max.
Max. Auxiliary standby PTU pumps. On. Bleeds on and min. Flight attendants notification. Complete. Flaps.
Indicating 15, planned 15.
Indicating 15, planned 15. Before landing checklist complete.
At around 1000 feet, I'll disengage the autopilot by clicking the click spot twice.
1000.
Light slope. 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 Light slope.
100 above.
Minimums.
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 Landing.
Check.
$100. 50. 40. 30. 20. 10.
And we're down. A bit of a shaky final approach, but we tightened it up before minimums. After landing checklist.
Alright.
Let's choose a parking spot from the chart. Stand 27 looks as good as any other.
After landing checklist complete.
And there we have it. Even though we hit a bit of unexpected bad weather on arrival, it didn't cause us too much trouble, and most importantly, we didn't have to divert. I hope you enjoyed the flight as much as I did. Don't forget to comment, like and subscribe if you want to see more. Until the next episode, goodbye, good luck and take care.